Las Vegas, 1975. The lights dim, the orchestra hums, and a tiny voice sings one line too early. The crowd gasps. Elvis turns, every camera waiting for his reaction. But instead of anger, he does something no one expected, and the entire arena melts into smiles. August 14, 1975. The Las Vegas Hilton Ballroom shimmered like gold. 2,000 people filled the seats, waiting for a man who could make time stop with a single note. The air buzzed with perfume, flashbulbs, and the soft rustle of programs bearing one name, Elvis Presley. Backstage, a little girl with brown curls clutched a microphone almost her size. Lisa Marie Presley was just 7. Her tiny hands trembled, her shoes polished brighter than the stage lights. "Just one line, Daddy, please?" she had asked earlier that evening. Elvis smiled, adjusting the high collar of his white Phoenix jumpsuit. "All right, Peanut. One line. Promise you'll wait for my cue." She nodded, then crossed her fingers behind her back. The band tuned up. Guitar strings buzzed. The brass shimmered through the curtains. Stage manager Joe Esposito gave a thumbs up. The king was ready. Outside, fans whispered, "He's bringing his little girl tonight." Some didn't believe it. Others prayed it was true. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley." The crowd exploded. Cheers, screams, even tears. Elvis stepped into the light, smiling that slow, grateful smile that made people feel seen. He adjusted the mic, bowed slightly, and started with "Love Me Tender." Backstage, Lisa peeked out. Her heart raced as she watched her father sway, his voice smooth as silk. The song was her favorite. She mouthed every word under her breath. Then came her line, the one he promised she could sing later. But she couldn't wait. Her voice slipped out early. Just one line. Tiny, shaky, but loud enough to pierce the air. The entire ballroom froze. Elvis stopped singing. The band stumbled to silence. A trumpet squeaked mid-note. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lisa's eyes widened. She realized what she'd done. Every spotlight seemed to turn her way. The crowd waited, tension humming in the air like an electric wire. Would the king be angry? Would he stop the show? Elvis lowered his mic slowly. He turned toward the side of the stage, his face unreadable. And then he smiled. It wasn't a stage smile. It was soft, real, full of love. He chuckled, a deep, warm laugh that rolled across the speakers. The audience erupted in laughter, relief washing through the room like a wave. He looked toward her and said into the mic, "Well, honey, I guess we're starting early tonight." The crowd cheered. Some stood to clap. Cameras clicked. A flashbulb popped so bright it caught the edge of Elvis's grin on film, a moment that would later appear on dozens of fan scrapbooks. Lisa giggled from the wings, her face pink with embarrassment and pride. Joe Esposito whispered, "She's got the Presleys' timing." Elvis turned back to the crowd, still laughing softly. "You see, folks," he said, "I told her she could sing one line. Didn't think she'd take it that literally." The audience roared again. The tension broke completely. The orchestra started over and the show went on. But backstage, Joe noticed something in Elvis's eyes. Tenderness, like he'd just seen a glimpse of something pure he'd forgotten. Maybe that's what made him turn the song into something else that night. Something more than rehearsed perfection. What would you have done if you were him? Corrected the mistake? Or embraced it? Because sometimes a single laugh can save a performance. And sometimes it can remind a father why he sings at all. Elvis adjusted the mic again, the crowd still buzzing, and said softly, "Let's try that again, baby girl. Together this time." The band reset. The lights dimmed. The next few minutes would become legend. The orchestra swelled again, softer this time, as if even the instruments didn't want to scare the moment away. Lisa stepped out from behind the curtain. The lights were blinding. She froze for a second, seeing thousands of faces staring back at her. Elvis looked over and smiled. "Come on, Peanut," he whispered into the mic. "Let's show 'em what family sounds like." The crowd melted instantly. You could feel the shift, from roaring excitement to gentle awe. Even the flashbulbs stopped for a breath. Lisa held his hand. Her fingers barely wrapped around two of his. He gave a nod to the band. The intro started again, soft and sweet. Then, together, they sang. Her voice was high, a little shaky, but brave. His was deep, steady, guiding her like a safety net. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The crowd swayed. Some couples held hands. One woman near the front wiped a tear and whispered, "That's the real Elvis right there." When Lisa stumbled over a word, he didn't correct her. He leaned down and filled in the gap with a hum, smiling all the while. Every time she looked up at him, he winked like it was all part of the plan. A few musicians on stage grinned behind their instruments. Bass player Jerry Sheff muttered, "Man, this is gold." In the control booth, sound tech Marty Paretta whispered, "Keep the tape rolling. Don't cut a thing." The mic crackled. Elvis leaned in. "Now that's how we make memories," he said, and laughter rippled through the crowd. Something magical happened in that moment. The concert wasn't a performance anymore. It was a family living room in front of 2,000 strangers. Lisa's confidence grew with every note. Her shoulders relaxed. She even started to sway. Elvis watched, half amused, half amazed. The audience was hypnotized. You could hear the applause swell like a heartbeat between verses. Halfway through the song, Lisa missed another cue. Elvis stopped midline, looked at her, then back at the audience and said playfully, "She gets that from me." The ballroom erupted. That laugh, it wasn't rehearsed. It was relief, joy, and pure pride rolled into one. He lifted her onto his hip and continued singing, his mic between them. Their voices tangled. A father and daughter sharing a melody only they could understand. A flashbulb popped. Somewhere, a fan caught that image. A small girl in white beside her father, both glowing under stage lights. Years later, that photo would hang in Graceland, captioned, "Love Me Tender." August 14th, 1975. The final note faded. For a moment, silence. Then thunder. The applause was so loud it rattled the chandeliers. Elvis kissed her forehead and whispered, "That's my girl." He set her down and gave her a gentle nudge toward Backstage. She turned, smiled at the audience, and waved shyly. The crowd melted all over again. Back in the wings, Joe Esposito bent down and said, "You just stole your daddy's show, kid." Lisa grinned. "He let me." On stage, Elvis waited for the noise to calm. He raised his mic again. "You all just saw my greatest duet partner," he said. The crowd cheered louder. "She might not know all the words, but she's got the heart." He looked toward the side curtain where she stood peeking out. His voice softened. "And that's what music's all about." The band launched into the next song, but everyone knew the show had already peaked. People clapped longer than usual, as if trying to hold onto the warmth that filled the room. In the control booth, Marty whispered, "This reel, we're keeping it forever." And he did. That tape would later become one of the most traded bootlegs among die-hard fans. What makes a mistake unforgettable? Maybe it's not the error itself, but the grace that follows it. As Elvis walked off stage during intermission, he looked at Joe and said quietly, "You know, Joe, that's the kind of moment they'll remember long after the lights go out." Joe smiled. "You're right, boss. That's the kind they don't rehearse." Elvis nodded, towel over his shoulders, and smiled. To himself. But backstage, Lisa wasn't smiling anymore. She sat on a crate, staring at the floor, her tiny hands clutching the mic she thought she'd ruined everything with. The sound of the crowd still echoed faintly from the stage. Elvis was about to learn that even a little girl's guilt can break a king's heart. The applause faded into a muffled hum behind the curtains. Elvis handed his mic to a stagehand and walked straight toward the little figure sitting by the amp case. Lisa's head was down. Her curls covered her face. The small microphone lay beside her like a broken toy. He crouched down slowly, careful not to scare her. "Hey, Peanut," he said softly. "Why the long face?" Her voice trembled. "I sang wrong. I messed up your song." Elvis paused. You could see the sweat still glistening on his collarbone from the stage lights. For a second, he said nothing. Then he smiled. "Baby," he said, "you didn't mess up the song. You made it mean something." She looked up. But everyone laughed. "Yeah," he nodded. "'Cause it was beautiful." His tone was calm, certain. He sat beside her on the cold floor, cross-legged like a kid himself. Joe Esposito stood a few steps away, pretending to check cables just to give them privacy. Elvis looked toward the curtain, where the crowd still cheered faintly from the encore break. "You know what all that noise is?" he asked. Lisa shrugged. "That's love, honey. That's what happens when people see something real." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "It didn't sound like your record." He laughed quietly. "That's the point. Records are for sellin'. Moments are for livin'." The band started tuning up again. Marty Pacetta's voice crackled over the stage monitor. 2 minutes, E. Elvis glanced at Joe. "Hold the next song. I'll be right there." He turned back to Lisa. "You still want to sing with me?" Her eyes widened. "Now?" He nodded. "Now." Lisa hesitated, then slowly smiled. Elvis stood and offered his hand. "Let's go make a little more history." They walked out together, the crowd erupting again when they appeared side by side. Some fans later said it felt like watching a sunrise. Quiet at first, then blindingly beautiful. Elvis waved to the audience. "All right, y'all," he said into the mic. "We're doing this one for keeps." The band slid into a softer tempo. "Can't Help Falling in Love." Lisa stood beside him, a little braver this time. Elvis let her start the first line alone. The arena went silent. You could almost hear her tiny heartbeat through the mic. She sang slow, unsure. But when she reached the word love, Elvis joined in, his baritone grounding her like an anchor. The sound wasn't polished. It was trembling, human, and beautiful. A woman in the 5th row covered her mouth. A man near the back whispered, "This right here's gonna be a story someday." Midway through the song, Elvis did something unexpected. He lowered the mic and stepped back, letting her voice fill the space by itself. For the first time, she didn't look scared. She just sang. You could feel it, that hush that only happens once in a lifetime. 2,000 people dead silent. No coughs, no flashes. Just a little girl and her father standing in a cone of golden light. When the chorus came, Elvis stepped in again. Their voices wove together, rough edges and all, like two parts of the same soul. At the final note, he looked down at her and whispered, "Perfect." Then came the explosion. Cheers so loud they shook the floorboards. The crowd stood, clapping, crying, shouting her name. Lisa blinked in disbelief. Elvis laughed and lifted her onto his shoulder. "Looks like I've been replaced," he joked. The laughter turned into a chant. "Lisa! Lisa!" She covered her face, giggling. Elvis looked up at her, pride shining in his eyes. Backstage later, Joe told Marty, "You got that all on tape?" Marty grinned. "Every second." Elvis overheard. "Good," he said. "Don't ever erase it." That reel, labeled Hilton, August 14th, 1975, father-daughter, would be copied, passed around, and eventually leak among collectors. The tape hissed with static, but everyone who heard it said the same thing. It felt like hearing love itself. What do you remember more, the perfect note or the honest one? The next morning, newspaper headlines read, "Elvis shares stage with Lisa Marie, heart over perfection." Even the critics who'd grown tired of his Vegas shows wrote gently that week. They called it a rare moment of purity. But for Elvis, it wasn't about press or applause. It was about the look in his daughter's eyes, the spark that told him she finally understood why he sang. He once told Joe later that night, "That's the closest thing I've felt to home in years." Joe didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over the King's tired, glowing face. Sometimes legends aren't made by perfect shows. They're made by fathers who stop singing just long enough to listen. And that night, Elvis did exactly that. The show ended in a roar that didn't fade for several minutes. Elvis waved one last time. his cape glittering under the golden lights, before disappearing behind the curtain. The moment he stepped backstage, the cheers softened into muffled echoes. But one sound still caught his ear: quiet sniffles from a corner near the dressing room door. Lisa sat there again, hugging her knees, her eyes red. The same microphone rested in her lap. She was whispering to herself, "I ruined Daddy's show again." Elvis's smile dropped. He walked over and knelt beside her, his voice low and calm. "Hey, sweetheart, why are you crying? You were perfect out there." She shook her head. "You laughed at me." Everyone laughed. He sighed softly and pulled a folded towel from around his neck, wiping the sweat from his face before wrapping it gently around her shoulders. "Honey, that wasn't a bad laugh. That was love, Logan. There's a big difference." Lisa looked up at him. Her lip quivered. "It didn't sound like the record." Elvis smiled sadly. "Records ain't life, baby. Life's got rough edges." He tapped her chest lightly. "But that right there, that's the good stuff." The crowd's chants still faintly echoed through the wall. "Lisa! Lisa!" She heard them and blinked. "They were cheering for me?" "Yeah," he said softly. "They were cheering for us." Joe Esposito poked his head through the door, grinning. "Boss, you got the mayor waitin' to meet you." Elvis waved him off. "Tell him the king's busy bein' a dad." Joe chuckled and disappeared down the hall. Elvis turned back to Lisa. "You know what my mama used to tell me?" he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small chain with a tiny locket, old and worn. She said, "Don't sing to impress them. Sing to bless them. You did that tonight." Lisa turned the locket over in her hands. Inside was a faded picture of Gladys Presley. "That's your mama?" Elvis nodded. "She'd have loved you, Peanut." He stood, took her hand, and led her toward the sound booth where Marty Paretta was rewinding the reel. "Let's listen to it." Marty turned, surprised. "You sure? It's raw, boss. You can hear the nerves." "That's exactly why I want to hear it," Elvis said. The tape hissed. Then came the sound. Lisa's tiny voice, trembling at first, then joined by his deep baritone. The room fell still. The hum of the reel became almost like a heartbeat. Lisa listened quietly, clutching her dad's jacket sleeve. When the song ended, she whispered, "It's not bad." Elvis smiled. "It's real. That's what matters." He looked over at Marty. "Keep that reel safe, all right? Label it real music." Marty grinned. "You got it, E." Elvis turned to Lisa again. "Remember this, Peanut, the stage ain't for perfect folks. It's for people who ain't afraid to mess up and keep singing anyway." She nodded slowly. "Like you." He laughed softly. "Especially like me." Outside, fans were still waiting by the back gate. Some held handmade signs. Others just wanted one more glimpse. Elvis crouched to her height. "You ready to give him a smile?" She hesitated, then nodded. Together, they stepped out into the night air. The crowd went wild again. Flashbulbs burst like tiny fireworks. One fan tossed a small white scarf toward them. Elvis caught it and wrapped it around Lisa's neck. "That one's yours now," he said. She giggled. "Feels like magic." Elvis smiled. "It is." A local reporter later wrote about that night, calling it the softest moment in Vegas showbiz history. Another paper printed a single quote from an audience member named Maria Davis. "I didn't see Elvis the star. I saw Elvis the father." That one line stayed with him. Later, back in his suite, Elvis watched Lisa fall asleep on the couch, the scarf still wrapped around her neck. He turned to Joe and said quietly, "You know, one day she'll understand that music's not about applause. It's about heartbeats sinking." Joe nodded. "She already does, E. She just doesn't know it yet." Elvis smiled, poured himself some water, and stared out the window at the glowing Vegas Strip. The city buzzed beneath him, loud, endless, demanding. But in that quiet suite, there was peace. He whispered, almost to himself, "That's my legacy. Not the jumpsuits, not the gold records, just that laugh." Because deep down, he knew long after the spotlight faded, it wouldn't be the perfect shows people remembered. It would be the laughter that turned a child's mistake into music that never stopped echoing. And that laugh, caught forever on one fragile tape, was already finding its way to the world. Years passed. The neon lights of Vegas dimmed, the white jumpsuits were stored away, and that tiny reel-to-reel tape slept inside a labeled box. Hilton, August 14, 1975. Real music. For decades, no one outside the Hilton staff ever heard it. But legends have a strange way of resurfacing. It began in 1988 when Marty Pietta retired. Cleaning his storage room, he found a dusty box marked EP Sessions. Inside was that small tape. He almost tossed it aside, until he noticed a note in Elvis's handwriting. "Don't erase. Love in this one." Marty paused. He played it once. The speakers hissed, cracked. Then that little voice filled the room. "Wise men say." A few seconds later, Elvis's laugh rolled through the static, warm and alive as ever. Marty just sat there, tears in his eyes. "It still breathes," he whispered. Within a year, the tape quietly made its way through collectors in Memphis and Nashville. No official release, just whispers, dubs, bootlegs passed from one fan to another. By 2002, it reached the early internet forums. A user named BlueSuede72 uploaded a scratchy version under the title Lisa Marie. "Love Me Tender Duet 1975. In a week, thousands clicked. Some thought it was fake. Others swore they could hear the Hilton crowd faintly cheering at the end. That laugh, one commenter wrote, can't be imitated. People began trading stories of where they were the first time they heard it. One man said he played it at his wedding. Another, a single father from Kentucky, said it reminded him to be gentle when his daughter made mistakes. Every replay felt like opening a time capsule. A window back to a moment when fame stepped aside and love took center stage. Then, one summer morning in 2005, Lisa Marie herself was asked about it on a radio show. The host played a few seconds. Her eyes watered instantly. "That was real," she said quietly. "Daddy kept that tape in his room. He used to call it our first song." For a second, the studio went silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the recording, the same hiss that once filled Marty's speakers decades before. It's strange, isn't it? How a mistake becomes the most precious thing we keep. Collectors say there are still only 3 known original copies of that reel. One sits in Graceland's archives, another with the Presley family, and a rumored third in a private collection in Tokyo. The Tokyo one, they say, is labeled in blue ink, "Feel the Song." Over the years, the story turned into a kind of legend told at fan conventions. Some fans even wear small pins shaped like a microphone with the date 1975 engraved beneath. A plaque was eventually placed near the old Hilton stage, now renamed the Westgate. It reads, "In this room, a father taught his daughter that love is louder than perfect." Tour guides still stop there. They point to the spot on stage where Elvis knelt that night and say softly, "Right there. That's where the laugh happened." Every visitor smiles. Some cry. The echo of that moment refuses to fade. If you close your eyes while standing in that empty ballroom, you can almost hear it. A faint hum, a giggle, a man's voice saying, "Well, honey, guess we're starting early tonight." It's more than music now. It's memory. And maybe that's what art really is. Something imperfect that outlives us because it feels human. Would you have kept that tape? Or would you have erased it, chasing perfection? Marty Pietta never erased it. Before he passed, he donated it to the Presley Foundation with a note attached, "For the world to remember the sound of grace." Today, visitors at Graceland can press a small silver button in the museum's family room. When they do, that recording plays, crackly, uneven, and beautiful. The crowd noise fades in. A little girl sings too early. A man laughs. And for 2 minutes, everyone listening forgets time. Decades have passed since that night in Las Vegas, but the story hasn't grown old. It's softened, like vinyl that still plays even with the scratches. At Graceland, sunlight pours through the glass hall where gold records line the walls. Among them hangs a small silver plaque few tourists notice at first. It reads, "It's not about perfect, It's about feelin' the song. That quote came from the quiet conversation Elvis had with Lisa backstage after her mistake. Joe Esposito wrote it down in his old tour diary, thinking no one would ever see it. Now it's etched in metal for millions to read. Every summer, families still visit the Westgate stage, the same ballroom once called the Hilton. Guides tell the story with a reverent hush, pointing to a single spotlight mark burned faintly into the wooden floor. That's where he knelt, they say. That's where she sang too early. Sometimes, a little girl in the tour group giggles and whispers, "I would have done the same thing." And parents smile because they know every child wants to sing first. Lisa Marie grew up carrying that night quietly in her heart. She once said during an interview, "It was the first time I learned music isn't about notes. It's about love that sounds like music." Whenever she sang later in life, she'd touch her earring, shaped like a tiny microphone, and say, "This one's for Daddy." The bootleg tape, the one Marty saved, eventually played during a Graceland anniversary broadcast. Millions tuned in. The sound was raw, full of hiss and warmth. But when Elvis laughed halfway through, the audience at home laughed with him, decades apart, yet somehow in sync. Think about that. A laugh recorded in 1975 still making people smile in 2025. That's more than nostalgia. That's echo. Historians call it the most human moment in Presley's catalog. Technicians have cleaned and remastered the track, but no one's dared remove the small cough in the crowd or the offbeat clap near the end. Those imperfections are sacred now. In the Graceland archive room sits the original reel, framed under glass beside Elvis's stage scarf and a handwritten lyric sheet for Love Me Tender. Visitors often press their palms to the glass, as if to feel the warmth still trapped in the tape. Outside, by the fountain, a young musician plays that same song on an acoustic guitar. He learned it by ear from that leaked recording. Between verses, he tells passers-by, "Listen to the laugh. It's the heartbeat of the whole thing." And he's right, because the story of that laugh has outlived the man himself. It's told by fathers teaching daughters piano, by singers who forget their lyrics and keep going anyway, by every person who's ever turned a stumble into something worth remembering. A fan club in Memphis even started an annual Feel the Song Day, where performers are asked to play one song imperfectly. No retakes, no polish, just pure feeling. They say it's in honor of the moment perfection bowed to love. Isn't that the real legacy? Not flawless concerts, but reminders that grace is louder than fear? Some nights, when the museum is closed and the halls go quiet, staff swear they can still hear faint laughter from the audio system that plays looping tracks after hours. A soft chuckle, followed by a child's tiny voice. Maybe it's just feedback. Maybe it's something more. What matters is what people feel when they hear it. They don't think about fame or fortune or Vegas lights. They think about a father looking down at his daughter, choosing kindness over pride. That's why, almost 50 years later, strangers still leave flowers under the plaque. Some leave cassette tapes, others handwritten notes that simply say, "Thank you for reminding us it's okay to make mistakes." The guards collect them every morning and place them in a small wooden box labeled tributes. Lisa's line. Inside that box are hundreds of messages from people who never met Elvis or Lisa, but who somehow feel they did. And that's what true legacy sounds like: soft, imperfect, eternal. The laugh that turned a mistake into music now belongs to everyone. Night falls over Memphis. The lights at Graceland flicker against the fountain, glowing pale blue. Crickets hum softly in the garden. Inside the house, the air feels still, like it's waiting for a familiar laugh to echo through the halls again. Visitors walk through the music room, stopping at the framed photograph. Elvis in his white Phoenix jumpsuit, kneeling beside Lisa Marie, both mid-laugh. Beneath it, a small brass plate reads, August 14th, 1975. Love Me Tender, duet. You can almost hear the moment frozen in that image. The crowd holding its breath. A father turning toward a frightened little girl. A laugh breaking the tension. A lesson that outlasted applause. Every legend leaves behind songs, records, and stories. But this story, this small, imperfect one, is the one fans whisper about the most. because it reminds them that greatness isn't about control. It's about compassion. Some nights, when the Graceland tours end, the staff dim the lights and play that duet quietly through the main hall speakers. The recording starts with a crackle, a heartbeat of silence, and then, that soft little voice. Wise men say, you can almost see the stage light glow across the empty floor. The sound feels alive even now, like the tape refuses to fade. A woman who works the late shift at the museum once said she listens to it every night before closing. It's not just a song, she whispered. It's proof that kindness can echo forever. And maybe that's the truth at the heart of all music legends. They weren't chasing perfection, they were chasing feeling. That's what keeps the name Elvis Presley beating in people's hearts half a century later. He didn't just sing to crowds. He reached into them. That laugh in 1975 wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't staged. It was a moment of grace, an unguarded choice that said, I see you. You're loved. Keep going. Every performer since has felt that truth, even if they don't know it came from him. You can hear it in the cracked voices of street singers, in a child's first piano recital, in a band's rough garage recording. The beauty isn't in how clean it sounds. It's in how honest it feels. Lisa once said in an interview years later, that night wasn't about music. It was about my dad showing me that love fixes everything. And maybe that's the greatest note Elvis ever hit, the invisible one that told the world it's okay to be human. Imagine if more people remembered that today. Imagine if every time someone stumbled, they laughed instead of hid. Wouldn't the world sound a little softer? A little more like music? Even now, when visitors play that recording, you can see tears in their eyes. Some close them as if traveling back to 1975. They picture the golden lights. They hear the hush of the crowd. They feel the warmth of a laugh that crossed time itself. That's the thing about sound, it never truly dies. It just waits to be heard again. And that's what Elvis left behind. Not just a legacy of songs, but proof that one kind choice can ripple through generations. So the next time you hear someone hit the wrong note, miss a beat, or stumble in front of a crowd, remember the story. Because somewhere, that same laugh is still echoing through the speakers of time, saying, don't chase perfect. Feel the song. If the story touched you, share it with someone who's ever doubted themselves. Maybe they need to be reminded that one mistake can become the memory that lasts forever. Were you or someone you love ever there in 75? Tell us below, and never forget, legends aren't flawless. They're just brave enough to keep singing.